Hello,
Okay.
world. We're recording. I'm here with Ruby Grynberg, and we've just decided that we are going to put out the next Home for Humanity podcast at a future date. And I would like to take a few minutes to ask you, Ruby, what would you like to dive into in that interview when it comes to lending and how the lending you do is changing the real estate scene, specifically with intentional housing and communities?
But so in lending, there are so many different platforms for lending. You can walk into a bank and they have certain services. You can go to a mortgage brokerage, you can work with a mortgage bank. But fundamentally, most of them are helping one or two people buy one house to live in, and that is all of it. And as we see the divide happening of the cost of homeownership, especially in the cities, but really all across the country, and how that compares to income. And just that there's this huge discrepancy that, I mean, homeownership has always been a challenge. That's why we call it the dream of homeownership. If it were easy, it wouldn't be a dream. Uh, but gone from being not easy to feeling impossible. And most problems that we face get a lot easier when we face them in community. And I don't think there's nearly enough conversation in the real estate market of how do people join forces to purchase real estate. Purchasing real estate, yes, it's about the real estate, but it's more about taking ownership of where you live, how you live, the communities in which you live. And so by helping people join forces and have the right conversations, what I find a lot is that folks will spend years, not months, but years, sometimes decades, sitting at the kitchen table talking about how they're going to build a commune and they're going to go buy a plot of land and build this whole thing. And the conversations that they're having, like they'll be debating about does each unit have their own kitchen or is it just one big central kitchen? For example, is one, random thing that might get talked about. But they're not talking about, okay, how much money does each person have to put into this project? What is that for a down payment? How much can we handle per month for a mortgage? And what does that translate to as a purchase price? Now let's start looking at properties. And then when you can start looking at properties, then that conversations about kitchen or no kitchen start to become relevant. And so my hope is to shift the conversation that's happening at home from circular to directional to helping people actually buy real estate. Because once you get your foot in the door, assuming you can hold that original purchase for a number of years, then maybe that original dream isn't your dream for forever. And that's okay. It can be a starter home and then you want to buy something bigger, or it can be a community house and then you want to branch off and do something on your own. But getting your foot in the door is what gives you that leveraging power to then create your next reality. And so many folks don't know how to get their foot in the door and either self-sabotage because they're just keep not having productive conversations. They might have fun conversations, but not productive. Or they create a story about how they don't even want it anyways. I don't even want to buy a house. That's and keep themselves stuck in a renter position and then subject to rents going up. And then there's a lack of control over your own reality and your own shelter that, well, it's avoidable in a lot of cases. It's really avoidable. And so I think I'm so glad, Sarah, that you're doing this podcast, because examining the stories that we tell ourselves around homeownership and the conversations that we have in community about how to attain what we want, I think really needs to shift. Um, I also believe that the real estate industry does a atrocious job of helping with those communications. ads are today's rates are rocket low. Today's housing prices have reached. It's all this conversation about rates and what's happening in the housing market and what the bond market's doing, and that's not actually a relevant conversation to homeownership. And
It,
so, yeah, shifting that.
totally. Thank you. Yeah, it's shocking how many people wait on the sidelines because of interest rates. And I and there's so many factors that go into what your actual payment could be. Um, and we were talking about this earlier. Why has it become politicized? Why has homeownership versus renting become politicized? It's almost, I mean, landlords are getting trashed on social media. Who would ever want to do that? And like I said earlier before we were recording, like landlords actually like hold the line for humane housing in some ways in community when it comes down to it. So
Absolutely.
why is it so political right now?
I think there is a there's I mean the haves and have nots and whoever you see yourself on that line when you feel like you're in the have nots and you're watching the uber rich get uber richer and your dream of home ownership feel less possible, then I mean, it's an I think very natural thing. You see kids on the playground going, "Well, I don't want that anyways. I don't, they're stupid for having whatever it is that you want." If you feel like you can't have it, then it's very human to diss it. And then you absolve yourself of your own personal responsibility of your economic situation. And ultimately, this is about shelter and being housed safely and in a dependable manner. And so if you have this, if part of your identity in terms of the political piece, part of your self-identity is oh, the rich are just, and you lump landlords and home ownership into that, which I mean, that's like when I started, I mean, tiny tangent, but like when I got into real estate, I realized that beige walls and like fake marble didn't have anything to do with banking. And I could actually create environments that were lively and fun and upbeat, and because the two weren't actually related, right? It's the same kind of thing. People are lumping home ownership into a political conversation when it's not political, but it can serve a absolvement of self-responsibility. Um, and being a landlord is challenging. Anybody who has been a landlord for any period of time likely has some horror story. I know I do. I've had more than one property trashed by tenants, but I've had years of fabulous tenants and wonderful relationships and wonderful supportive communities where they have the housing that fits their needs where they want to live right now. And I have a tenant that fits my needs and everybody is thriving. Those stories don't get talked about. It's like how the bad reviews, everyone's quick to do a bad review, but going on and saying, you're awesome, feels less needed. And so I think it's they're like all of these, there's so many elements to the conversation. One is around self-identity, one is around personal responsibility, and then one is not understanding the other's perspective. Like it's really hard to own a property, be responsible for those mortgage payments, have your tenant not pay and trash your property, and then still be nice about it. That blows. And a lot of tenants are so caught up in their own storytelling and lumping landlords into some other that they're not humanizing the landlord and blaming them for exactly not humanizing them as tenants.
Mhm.
And most social problems can at least, if not be solved, can be improved by humanizing
The
both
other.
sides.
Yeah,
Yeah. It was like almost if we could do a compassionate listening workshop
totally.
between landlords and tenants, right? Because everyone needs to understand the other perspective. And one of the differences is most landlords have been tenants, but most tenants have not been landlords. And the tenants that have been landlords typically don't have the same opinion of landlords,
Right.
right? They're much more cooperative and understanding of the predicament that the landlord is in.
I have a couple thoughts, I guess, with separating. What do you um because markets are local. I imagine where you're at in Seattle is just, I mean, I'm thinking of, yeah, being in Seattle and how drastically different approaching housing was where I came from in rural Missouri. And so the idea of a landlord is really different in, like, let's say you're in a small town and like half of the town gets bought up by Airbnbs. Or like how do you explain to someone about, yes, there is this gold inside of the landlord. They do, it's hard, but the power for good they have in a community is so profound when that person's perspective might be like landlord equals big dirty hedge fund who
Right.
like owns half my town and doesn't care about it at all.
Yeah.
So how can people think about landlords differently?
Probably that same individual that's lumping an individual homeowner, landlord person into hedge funds buying up towns would argue vehemently about lumping one person based on their race or based on their religion or based on any attribute about them and lumping them in with a group of a population that they have a negative connotation around. For some reason, this discussion feels like it's outside of any other discriminatory discussion.
Hmm.
And it's the exact same process.
Yeah.
It's seen as the other, it's seen as the unknown, the foreign. It's scary. And when you have an idea that taps into your sense of identity, to see your landlord as a human and not just lumped into some group requires a questioning of your own identity and your own thoughts and beliefs. Humans have a hard time with that.
Yep.
We're all working on it. But so often, this is a place where I feel like on that political discussion, there's really a lack of awareness or self-exploration about why am I so angry at this person?
Yeah.
Have anything to do with them?
Oh, we're in so much pain.
No.
I mean, it's 20, almost 2025, and people have been hurting for a while, and it's like things are getting worse, not better. So I think about that phrase all the time, that hurt people, and also healed people heal people. And that's one of the things that like pushes me to keep having conversations like this and continue a project that I at first started calling this podcast an interview series project. And I'm like, everyone's doing a podcast. Sorry, the sun is wow. Um,
Yeah.
but I can't let it go. You're describing these people that you've met over years who you recognizing they have had these kitchen table conversations for decades. And I keep meeting person after person with the same feelings and like vision for something that's more cooperative and a more collaborative culture, and just to not do everything alone or feel so like heavy with the burden and busyness and scarcity that just is. And we are a very abundant um culture, and I suppose if there's any way that I can help people reach into that, well, that real human heart that just wants to be acknowledged, that like, hey, this sucks, but also um we can and are imagining housing very differently. That's what I've learned in the 2.5 years I've been on like my real estate journey, is that I am not alone in these thoughts. We are not, I mean, every conversation I have just on this and the people I meet in the public are, we're thinking and shared images. And so
Yeah.
to bring in the money piece and the legal piece and the real estate piece and the soft skills, the conflict resolution piece, the contract piece. I don't know, all of it. So I'm really
There's,
excited to dive in
yeah.
more
And
time.
there's, our system is set up for an individual person or family units, nuclear family unit, to purchase an individual house or purchase a multifamily. Maybe they live in one unit and rent out the others. But this idea of a community or several people purchasing together, uh, when it is outside of the box. Now, I don't think it was outside of the box several hundred years ago, right? These aren't
Right.
new concepts.
They're not new.
Humans living in community with multi-generations and supporting each other so that some people can be birthing kids, other people can be watching those kids, and
Right.
other people can be generating income, other people can be fixing the houses and the cars and whatever needs fixing. Like, this is not a new concept, but we're so estranged from it
Yeah.
that it's breaking down belief systems and finding creative ways to navigate the banking system
Yeah.
to fit. But the reality is it's not so, I mean, you could put 10 people on a loan application. Like, it's not that hard. It's not so impossible. It's not like you're so far out of the box. It just requires intentionality and the right conversations.
Yeah. And we're trained as a public that I mean, as a real estate agent, I'm like, real estate agents aren't trained to support that conversation. We're actually, our training is pretty specific to what you were saying is like, there's a system here and I'm going to help you go through this journey. But I am only interested in those people who, well, not only, I shouldn't say that. I shouldn't be so limiting, but I know plenty of millionaires and they're great too. But there's also this population who like they can't even like the banks aren't approving them. It doesn't matter if they have the cash flow or the savings. There's little factors that like, or maybe they have it but they can't live alone. They need help. So whatever the factor is, I think any way to support collaborative buying, collaborative space, like creating space where you don't feel so isolated. I think there's a lot of healing that can actually happen through
And seeing
what
it
we're
as
envisioning.
possible, because I have seen people come to my office or to come to my, desk being like, I want to buy a house. And I'm looking at their situation going, I have no idea how you are going to buy a house, but let's figure it out, right?
Yeah.
What do you got for down payment? What do you have for
Yeah.
monthly payment? Okay, let's figure out what options are out there and get you pre-approved for whatever that purchase price is. And then it's up to you to go find something
Yeah.
that works for your family. And sometimes they have to put in offer after offer after offer after offer. I mean, sometimes it's challenging, but then they become homeowners. And then I hear so many stories of people just they're so busy being pissed off at homeowners that they think it's impossible and never even try.
Yeah.
You're like, you could totally buy a house right now. You totally. Now, is it the house that is your dream house? Well, maybe not, but kind of that's up to you. Like, the only problem there is the discrepancy between your expectation and reality. And that's where most suffering comes from, anyways.
That's
So, welcome to being alive. Okay, it
right.
also applies to real estate.
Right. Yeah. Oh my gosh, I think about
Get
this
over it,
all the
right?
time. I think about this all the time. There was one day living, I felt like lonely and crowded in this house that we bought back. I lived in Missouri. It was the first house we bought. And then one day I realized this is a castle. This is huge. Like it just, I don't know, my perspective shifted in a way that I was like, anywhere in the world, this single family house would be a castle. There's running water like in so
Every
many rooms.
right, right. You just turn a faucet and it comes on, and
It's
you could probably drink from it.
yeah, right. And it's
Like,
and yeah, the expectations. And so, you're very smart. And I want to ask you one final question with this time and say, you've gotten the gist of my podcast project. And thank you for helping me warm back up to the project after a big shift in my life
hi.
this year. Um, What would you say would be, because it really comes down to division and the divisiveness in our culture, a lot of the themes. I just keep hearing that word. It's we're divided in so many ways. Um, and how young we are to these traditions that are longing for again. We all have we're we have amnesia for the way we used to live in community. And it's not new, the ideas. And it is quite simple, the solutions, but they're not current systems. So I guess
Yeah.
in helping people come back to the fullness of their humanity in this research, I've said research project. It is kind of a research project in the field of real estate for me. This whole venture is we're just trying to
Yeah.
help people find solutions. Um, it's the Home for Humanity podcast. What's the tagline? Like what's the what would you say like what's the thing that
Um,
it's
I mean,
doing?
the what comes to mind is like self-empowerment through real estate or something. Now, I'm not saying those are the words, right?
Uh-huh.
But um it's all of the divisiveness is noise.
Yeah.
It's completely irrelevant to the conversation. And as soon as you're engaging in how your real estate journey compares to anybody else's, you can have that conversation if that's a fun conversation for you to have. And you're like, well, let's talk about that. But don't think that you're actually moving your real estate journey forward by having the conversation. You're kind of participating in the noise. So when you're done with that, like, okay, done with that, and you're ready to actually move your home ownership journey forward, not defined by anybody else's parameters, that's when it all becomes possible.
Mm.
And unless you fall into an amount of money that is enough to purchase the kind of property that you're wanting to live in, therefore purchasing cash, you're in that situation, then you get to go, what kind of house do I want? And that gets to be your first question. Very few of us are in that position, right? And so starting with the right questions. How much money do you have for a down payment? How much can you afford every month? Not what can you be approved for, but what can you responsibly pay every month? And when the conversations start to shift to the basics of the financing, and you get curious about the financing, again, bashing it and being mad at it, not productive. So when you can approach it from a place of curiosity of, well, let's see, if I have this much money and I can pay this much a month, what's possible? Then you're moving your own journey forward and you keep tugging on that thread until you get to a place where you go, okay, now I'm ready to start looking at property. And until our culture supports that process, people will keep starting with the house because that's the fun part,
Hmm.
right?
Right.
Nobody says, I want to save up to buy a bicycle when they're 6. They say, I want a red bike, right? And then they figure out how to, right? We don't change.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. But as adults, we do have to use that whole frontal lobe thing and start with the financing, start with the questions that we can answer for ourselves, and then turn to professionals that we can trust. Because if we go to professionals and decide that everything they say is bullshit and they're trying to screw us over, then you're not going to learn anything. Right. So, but that's again your own, that's each person's own responsibility to take care of the noise in their own head, to find professionals that they can trust, and then take their advice, do what they say to do. Right. If they say pay off your credit cards, pay off your credit cards. uh,
Step one.
right. Step one, as an example, right? Of um, and then just really stay on your own journey. And if you find that part of your journey is collaborating with others and you can access what you want to access by pooling funds and pooling resources, then don't be afraid of it. Do it. Yes, it's a little more complicated than buying on your own, but you wouldn't be buying on your own. That's why you're right. Like
Right,
you
right.
can't accomplish on your own what you can accomplish with others.
Yeah, yeah.
And so, yeah, just letting go of the chatter, the noise.
I love that because
That's
it
the
is,
only
it is.
divisive.
Oh, sorry, what was that?
Oh, that's the only divisiveness is your own self-talk. The housing market isn't actually divisive by itself.
Yeah. I think about that line a lot. The line between good and evil runs through every human heart. It just comes to me like in the middle of the day sometimes, like every human heart, because I catch myself like, yeah, like demonizing the other or getting angry
Yeah.
because of my own shit. And
Yeah.
and it's just like, no, every human heart, like I get to choose this path. And um yeah, the psychology of of breaking down the meaning of home and money and humanity and connection, belonging and yeah, family and community. I guess yeah, that's it. I love that. I love that. Thank you for that. Um, well,
Oh, well,
until
it's so wonderful
next
to
time.
connect, and I applaud what you're doing here. We need these sorts of conversations. We need the education and the conversations because it's not just a this is how it is and you should listen. Humans don't really learn that way.
Yeah. I figure if I can inspire one person, um, that's enough because it's those little glimpses for me that have helped me at different points. So it's like just share the light, share more light. I say that as there's like streams coming in.
I love
It wasn't
it.
that. Well, thank you.
Yay. Thank
Until next
you.
time, we'll dive in deeper.
Okay, sounds good.